One thing Airtro Heating and Air Conditioning stands by: your comfort should never be compromised. Airtro is your headquarters for AC service and repairs in Pasadena, Los Angeles, and San Gabriel Valley. And now you can upgrade your home comfort with a new Lennox AC unit and enjoy up to $1,500 in rebates. Our high-efficiency Lennox residential air conditioners, furnaces, and HVAC systems help maximize comfort while reducing energy costs. Save now at airtro.com, airtro.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Los Angeles, the Win Without Competing show with Dr. Arlene Barrow, Career Coach 1 and author of Win Without Competing. I'm Dr. Arlene. Welcome to my show. I will teach you how to use my Right Fit method, which will empower you to achieve your career and life goals. My guest today is Dr. Deborah Shlian, who is a physician, entrepreneur, and author of nonfiction and fiction. Her latest novel, an international thriller entitled Rabbit in the Moon, was just named Best Books 2008 Awards Finalist by USA Books. I invited Dr. Shlian with us today to share her passion and how it propels her to succeed in both her professional and personal life. I met Deborah in 1995. The phone rang, I picked it up, and Deborah was calling me to introduce herself. It turns out that we were doing business with the same fast-growing new company who was hiring rapidly. Both of us were working on executive searches for them, and Deborah was curious about me. Instead of seeing me as a competitor, she viewed me as a potential collaborator. Over the years, we worked together on a number of executive searches. Deborah, you selected medicine as your first career. How did passion propel you into medicine, and why family medicine?
Well, first of all, let me say hello, and good to talk with you again, Arlene. My passion for medicine, I think, started early when I was just a young kid. My dad was a physician. He was an internist, but he was the old-fashioned internist. He even made house calls. And I remember riding with him and even going into the kitchens of some of his patients and sitting and listening and being very impressed with how much respect and how much care he gave to his patients and vice versa. So, from early on I decided that was for me. Now, why family medicine versus internal medicine? Actually, just as I was finishing up medical school, the whole idea of reinventing the generalist had started, and there was a movement to begin residency programs for family medicine, which would include not just taking care of an adult patient, but also pediatrics and even doing some OBGYN. This, to me, was really quite interesting, and I started to research possible residency programs after medical school. And long story, but I got married in medical school, and my husband talked me into going to California. There was an opportunity out there for a residency program, which we did together, and then we started with the same group in which we had done a residency.
I believe that is the Permanente group. Can you tell us why you stayed at Kaiser Permanente, and how long were you there?
Okay. Well, first of all, Kaiser Permanente was one of the first HMOs, or managed care organizations, in the country, and but it's a very unique model. It's what's called a multi-specialty group, a medical group model, versus what's called an independent practice association, where you may have individual doctors that work under the umbrella of the same organization. Basically, what Kaiser offered was the opportunity to practice in a hospital setting, so that my office could be within the hospital, and my patients could be seen in the clinic on the second floor, say, and then if they had to be admitted, they were admitted onto the fourth or the fifth floor. If they had to go to the emergency room, that was downstairs on the first floor. All the labs were in the same building, all the subspecialists. So that was the appeal. And my husband and I both practiced there together. Again, the appeal was the ability to work together there too, and have the same schedules. And we stayed there for almost 10 years.
Well, why did you then decide to leave? Because I know you did leave. What prompted you to leave?
Okay, good question. And these are not all easy to answer in a second. But basically, I was very happy practicing at Kaiser for a long time. I really I felt I found my stride. I was loving the patients, and basically because I grew up in a setting, a very stable medical setting in terms of my dad's practice. I had always thought that wherever I started practicing medicine, I would stay forever. But about, I guess, into the 10th year, I started to get a little itchy. I wanted to get more involved in some of the policy of the group, and I had already been involved with teaching at the university. My husband and I had been doing some clinical research projects, and we wanted to expand on that, and there was a little bit less opportunity to do that within the Kaiser setting. And so I started to take an accounting of where I was at that 10th year and where I wanted to go, and started to think about other opportunities.
In terms of accounting, can you talk about it from two perspectives, from the perspective of your passion and the perspective of the right fit?
Right. Well, I think the passion itself is I've always, no matter what I've done, I've always felt, obviously you have to do it at your best. And part of practicing medicine for me meant being able to be accountable to my patients whenever they needed me. And what happened was my practice had grown so large. I was actually the only woman in my department for many, many years. I had over 3,000 patients by the time I left, and the administration was not willing to close that practice. So that I decided that perhaps I needed to look at other practice settings to see if I could translate that same passion by being able to practice in a setting that didn't put me at odds with what I felt was best for the patient care. So
am I correct that the time that you would spend with the patients had to decrease as a result of the patient volume?
Correct. What happened was that in that year, the competition in the community had gotten much tougher, and some of the administration had decided to start to cut down on the time that they were allotting us to see the patients. And my husband and I both felt that really was not acceptable, and we of course spoke up about it and felt that we were fighting an uphill battle at the time. And because I had an opportunity at that point to go to the university where I had been teaching already, I kind of left at that chance and made what turned out to be a wonderful decision.
Was UCLA, am I correct?
Was UCLA, correct.
Okay.
Right.
Tell us what you did at UCLA, because I know you did a variety of things, and you also went to graduate school while you were there.
Right. Well, one of the things, as I said, I started to feel I wanted to get more involved in understanding the overall healthcare system in a way that would allow me to have a greater impact. And at UCLA, I was offered the opportunity to become the director of primary care for the Student Health Service, which was a unit that served all 33,000 undergraduates and graduate students on the campus. And one of the things that I was able to get the administration to promise me was that I could really redirect the program in any way I wanted to. They gave me sort of free rein. I think at the time they didn't expect me to do what I did, but the student health was in the basement of the hospital, and up until that point it was really a place where the kids would come for cuts and bruises, but nothing really very chronic. And so I decided to take the program, the things that I had learned at Kaiser, the good things of the Kaiser system, and to apply that to the Student Health Service. And I actually hired brand new staff. We had all board-certified physicians. We started developing clinical research programs and networking with the School of Public Health as well as the business school. And so I was very much encouraged by my boss, which was terrific. So that really was a big difference from the Kaiser days.
Give us some other insight. Did you do some lab work there as well, and also decided to pursue another degree?
Right. Well, what happened is that after I left Kaiser, there was a little bit of a lull. I was offered the job at Student Health, but I wasn't ready to take that because I actually thought that I wanted to become more involved in health policy. And I had a friend who talked me into starting law school at Whittier Law School, which is a part-time night program. It was a very very well thought of program, and actually was a brand new health policy program that I was enrolled in. But when the people at UCLA said, you better decide one way or the other if you want this job, I decided to take the job at UCLA and still go to law school part-time. In the second year of law school, my boss at UCLA said, if you switch to the MBA program, we'll pay for it because we think that you really have good administrative skills, and we'd like to see you work here full-time. And so I, again, another fork in the road decision-wise, but decided that I really, really enjoyed the administrative side of medicine and wasn't really interested in being a lawyer, and switched over to the MBA program, which incidentally I talked my husband into doing as well.
Aha. Well, we're going to hear more about that later when we probe into your personal life. Okay. Going a bit back into the childhood, I wanted to, before we look at you from the perspective of a novelist, I wanted to talk a bit more about your childhood. In terms of your dad, when he took you around to the different homes, how did you feel as far as connecting to the passion of a physician? Not what did you think, but how did you feel? Because the seed was planted early.
Right. I think the way that patients looked at my father, the way that it was very clear that they loved him. I mean, they really respected him, and that he almost became part of their families. And I thought that was really a unique and wonderful thing. And so, I also grew up with the Marcus Welby sort of image of the doctor, which my father I really felt was, so that I became very excited about the idea of being able to be that kind of doctor.
Did your dad encourage you?
Yeah, I think he did. I mean, he really was very willing to let me do whatever I wanted to do, although I must say that I also liked to write even early on. And when I told him that I was even thinking about being a writer at one point, he said, well, you can always be a writer, but a doctor is something that, he made me feel that was really something even more important. And so I suppose I took some of that advice, even unsaid advice.
Did you go to his office when you were a child?
Oh, yeah. I actually often would act as his secretary when his secretary was out.
How old were you when you were acting as his secretary?
Well, it would be during vacations, but I was probably 13, 14 years old.
Terrific.
Because by the time I was 15, I was already working in labs in the hospital. I was also very interested in research and felt that was an opportunity to get a feel for that side of medicine as well.
Did your mother have a role in shaping your career?
My mother was always extremely proud of anything that I did, and I have to say she was the one who would drive me to the hardware store when I was doing my science fair projects. She endured when I had mice in the basement, white mice for one of my science fair projects, and I think her encouragement and her sense of pride in what I was able to accomplish was certainly a factor.
Over the years, when you changed from Kaiser, for example, to UCLA, Did you consult with your dad at all? Did he make any comments about his thoughts about what you were doing? I mean, I know you consulted with your husband. I'm just curious if you consulted with your dad.
I think at that point I kind of told him what I had decided to do.
Okay.
Because I will say this, my dad, who I love dearly, is less of a risk taker than I am, I think. And I think if I had told him before I left Kaiser that I was leaving a very stable position, which had guaranteed pension, and, you know, if I had wanted to, could have stayed there, and many of my colleagues are still there 30 years later, you know, he might have been a little bit wary of such a decision.
How many years was your dad in private practice?
He practiced until he was 83 years old. And he'll be 90 in April.
It's amazing. It really is amazing that he practiced until age 83.
Yeah.
Would you say that he connected to the passion as if he were young and rushing around to the homes? And I'm curious, did he still visit the homes as he got older?
No, what happened, I mean, medicine changed. And so, you know, he became, from a single practitioner to, he became the senior partner in a 5 or 6 man group by the time he retired. And at that point, you know, medicine had become much more office and hospital based rather than home health. Although at one point he did take a job as he was a part-time home health director at the hospital. But he didn't actually make house calls at that point in his 80s, I have to say.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that would truly be unbelievable.
Well, I think if that had been the practice, I mean, he was in Baltimore. You know, of course, it was. You know, weather doesn't. You know, in wintertime isn't the easiest to be driving. Although he drove until he was 87 or 88. But I think that you know that he's always enjoyed that interaction with patients and had a very a huge number of old people who, you know, were his age by the time he retired. I mean, that he had been his patients since they were young.
So he grew old with his patients.
He grew old with his patients, exactly.
It's wonderful.
And to me, that was always the great model. And I still wish that we had more of that today.
I agree with you. I know our audience is eager to hear about your career as a novelist. Your first novel was published in 1982. What motivated you to start writing novels, and how have your other careers impacted on your success as a novelist?
Okay. Well, again, these are not the easiest questions to answer because they're little fits and starts in terms of writing the novels. What happened was I actually had started to write a book about managed care and tried to get publishers on the East Coast interested in what HMOs were doing and what my husband and I both felt were directions that they were taking that we thought were maybe misdirections. This is in the 80s. And I remember a publisher in New York saying to me, "What is an HMO?" And when I explained, they said, "Well, that's what you crazy Californians would do, but this is something that would never take off in terms of the country, and certainly on the East Coast." So frustrated, I had talked to a couple of friends who said, why not do what Robin Cook has done, which is to write novels, but within the context of a fiction, put in your ideas about how you feel about medicine. In other words, write a medical mystery. And so I thought a lot about that, and I actually began to write my first and unpublished, I have to say, and I didn't even try to peddle it, book about managed care, but it was really too much of a rant, and it wasn't a very well-written book. But it got me very interested in the idea of writing again and writing fiction. And so the very first novel I wrote, which was called Double Illusion, was actually based on an incident that happened at our hospital. This is where a very bizarre story about a nurse who had was stolen babies from nurseries, but not just one. She had gone from Texas until California, where she was eventually arrested, and there were 9 children living in her home that she was raising that she had stolen from individual nurseries over the years. So I took that story, the idea of that story, and basically developed a psychological thriller, and luckily was published and did very well.
Your latest novel is Rabbit in the Moon. which takes place in China. Take it from there, Deborah.
Okay, well, Rabbit in the Moon is our most ambitious novel. And by the way, all of the novels I've written and published so far have been co-written with my husband. It's a novel that is an international thriller. As you said, it takes place in China, Korea, Hong Kong, Macau, of course, Los Angeles and Washington. These are all places that we've traveled and spent time. The story is basically the story of strong-willed Dr. Lily Kwan, who's an American-born Chinese and a medical resident in Los Angeles. And when she challenges her chief of medicine and risks losing a coveted fellowship, she decides to accept an invitation to study medicine for a few months in China. It's an impulsive decision, partly based on a promise that she's made to her dying mother that she would someday visit the home of her ancestors. And little does Lily know that she's going to become a pawn in a deadly international conspiracy as greedy and ambitious men vie to gain control of her grandfather's discovery of the secret of long life.
Tell us what Rabbit in the Moon means.
Oh, okay. The title has nothing to do with astrology. It's based on old Chinese folklore. According to legend, there's said to be a rabbit in the moon that is pounding on the elixir of life. And there are many, many stories that go along with this, but that's essentially the essence of why we chose that title.
Your next novel is Dead Air. Can you share an advance peek?
Sure. Well, Dead Air is coming out December of 2009, not this December, so you have a whole year. It's the first in a series about Sammy Green. Sammy is a young journalist student who, in this first book, gets her own radio talk show, and she uses the radio show as a forum to discuss controversial campus issues in the first book, including the idea that teaching has taken a backseat to research. When one of her professors, who's just won the annual teaching award, dies unexpectedly, she begins to suspect that his death is murder and not suicide. And her investigation leads to clues that point to an unethical experiment being conducted using students as subjects. Of course, the more she finds out, the more Sammy's life is in jeopardy.
Well, I guess I don't want to ask you how it ends, because I certainly don't want to spoil it for our audience. Before we go on to your personal life, I'd like to step back a bit to the point at which you left UCLA and talk about why and how you became an entrepreneur. Again, you were propelled, this time to entrepreneurship.
Right. Well, as I told you, my boss had suggested that I get an MBA, and I did that, and we completed the executive MBA program in 1988. Two things happened as a result of the MBA program. First, my responsibilities expanded in my job at UCLA to include things like strategic planning and budgeting and contracting for outside specialty care. Started doing recruitment of all the practitioners. I had been doing that, but really expanded the role to the whole, all of student health. I was involved with quality assurance, utilization management, and I actually helped to develop a computerized patient record to capture data for outcomes measurements. So that was one thing. And the second thing, and most surprising, was that I started to get calls from recruiters that's alerting me to other opportunities in medical management. Suddenly, I'd been told that my experience as both a clinician and a manager in two managed care settings, both at Kaiser and UCLA, coupled with the MBA degree, made me a strong potential candidate for many organizations looking to import the kind of expertise and knowledge. So as flattered and curious, I started to explore a few of these opportunities. What happened was I had never worked with recruiters before, and so I really had no idea what to expect from them. They'd call the office and identify themselves as representing a particular job opportunity, and then they might inquire as to whether I wanted to be considered, and if not, did I know someone who might like that job. But usually the recruiter, it turned out, had minimal information about the organization, and they asked very few questions about my management experience and nothing about my interests or my career goals. So often when I went to go out to the interviews, I found that the opportunity was entirely different from what the recruiter had described to me. Either the job scope was totally different, the organization turned out to be a different kind of organization than they'd said.
So you were the wrong fit, am I correct?
Exactly, that I wasn't the right fit. And it seemed clear that these recruiters weren't really serving their clients very well. there was, because as you know, sending an inappropriate or disinterested candidate is a waste of everybody's time and money. But what I came to learn that even negative situations like these turn out to be potential opportunities. And I ultimately made that next career move from physician management to medical management entrepreneur because of that quote-unquote negative experience.
Did you feel that you knew how you could conduct the search so that you would be able to find the right fits for your clients?
Exactly. Well, it started in the beginning. I would actually at some of these interviews say, I'm not right for this job, but I know exactly who it would be. And every once in a while those people would be hired. My husband said to me, you just got an MBA degree. Why are you doing this for free? You should really, you're good at it, and you should think about doing this seriously. And so
He sounds like a great career coach.
He's wonderful. He's always been great. And what happened was but here was again a fork in the road. Do I leave a very not only comfortable job at UCLA, but one I really, really did enjoy, to take a leap and really start something on my own, which, as you know, is often fraught with less success for most people than you necessarily would assume. And so I decided to do it kind of part-time, and took on a couple of searches that I had been asked to do, and as they became as I was successful in doing that, I decided to finally leave UCLA and start my own company. And to answer your question, yes, I really felt very strongly that I had unique skill set in terms of my own experience as a physician and a manager, and understanding the healthcare system, and was much more willing to be a mentor to both an organization and to the potential candidates.
It's interesting that throughout your career, you've increased the risk. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Tell us what enabled you to do that.
Well, I probably have to give all the kudos to my husband. I think that we, if you're ready to talk about my personal life, we met in 4 days.
Let's talk about your personal life.
Okay.
I know that your husband, Joel Shlian, is a family medicine physician who's been by your side for how many years?
38 years.
That's a long time, and you're both still strong, so to speak.
Very, very happily married. Yes.
I know. He's also your co-author of Rabbit in the Moon, Double Illusion, and Wednesday's Child. Take it from there.
Well, Joel and I met in medical school. We started talking one day, and 4 days later we were engaged, and 6 weeks later we were married. And Joel was just getting ready to start a residency in an ophthalmology. He was going to be an eye surgeon, and I was, not sure exactly what my specialty would be at that point, but I knew that I didn't want to be a surgeon. So,
how did you know you didn't want to be a surgeon?
Well, maybe it was the times. Perhaps today I might feel differently, but at the time I really was following my father's lead in terms of wanting to be a general practitioner, whether an internist or a family physician, and wasn't really that interested in surgery in the sense of I saw surgeons as people who didn't necessarily have the kind of one-on-one relationship that I wanted with my patients. So
they cut and ran. Is that what you envisioned?
It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but I think that's the stereotype anyway.
Yeah. Well, I worked with a surgeon for a number of years and helped him establish a rectal cancer center. And he used to call me from the operating room while he was doing his surgical procedures to chat to find out what was going on.
Right.
So I think that you picked the right fit for yourself.
Right. But, what happened with Joel is that, he said to me one day in the middle of his first year, we're never going to be together if he's an eye surgeon and I'm a family physician. So let's he is the risk taker. He quit his residency, which to this day he's still well known for that, infamous. And he said, well, he waited. I was a year behind him. He waited till I finished my internship, and then we went out to California and looked at the Kaiser system where we did our residencies in family medicine. So he was really the impetus.
Tell us a little bit about his background. What enabled him to be a risk taker? Because it sounds like you're more conservative, he's more of a risk taker, and he's helped you take the risks from what you've described.
Right.
So what happened in his early life to encourage that?
Right. Well, neither one of his parents went beyond college, and he was really the first one that went to college and medical school. So that a lot of who Joel is really is something that he has within himself. I think that that just sense that he can do whatever he puts his mind to, and it fortunately was catching, because the more that he encouraged me, the more I saw that it was possible to do the things that he said you can do it.
Let's step back to getting engaged after 4 dates. Am I correct?
4 days. Not
days. 4 days. Okay. All right.
Right.
You spent 4 days together?
Well, we were both working. It was summer. We were both working in an emergency room, and so we. So
you literally did spend 4 days together.
We spent 4 days.
In the emergency room,
exactly.
so to speak.
But we spent a lot of time talking about our priorities, about the things that we were passionate about.
Good. Let's hear more about that, because I want to figure out, with your input, how you determined that he would be the right fit husband.
Well, one of the things that, I had been around mostly men in school. There were only 8 women in my class. And most of the guys didn't even want to date a medical student, let alone encourage a female to be a doctor at that point. This was in the 70s. But that was not true of Joel, so that was number one. Number two, he talked about the fact that relationship was really a priority for him, that marriage was something that was very important. And that really, to me, was quite unique at the time. In my experience with talking to most of the classmates and male friends that I had, that was not necessarily, that career came first. But he said that, they didn't have to be mutually exclusive. And so I felt that was really very refreshing and very seductive, I guess.
Well, also, too, at a young age, it sounds like he had thought through about how to balance professional life with personal.
Right. He was I think Joel was always very uniquely mature, for his age. And because he really had to do a lot on his own. I mean, his family, although they were supportive in the sense of emotionally, they really had not had the kind of education that my father, for example, had. So he's someone who learns a lot on his own. He's very wise, I guess, and always was about those kinds of things. And I think the word passion, can't be understated. I think just the excitement about life and all the possibilities really was really terrific. I just have found it impossible to stay away.
I gather you've been with him for 38 years, so I believe that it has been impossible to stay away.
Right.
Let's go further about balancing the personal and the professional life. What are the decisions that you've made along the way, and how have you both changed your careers to continue this balance?
Right. Well, the first thing, of course, is that Joel changed from surgery to family medicine. The second thing was we talked long and hard about children. And at the time that that we joined Kaiser, and as I said, I was the only woman in my department, there were a lot of demands on our schedules. And early on, it became very clear that we had to make a decision about whether I would if we were going to have children, if we were, was going to stay working full time or not. And I really didn't want to give up the full time career. And we thought and talked and watched the few women that I knew in town who were physicians who had children, and saw the difficulty that I thought that they had in terms of balancing at that time. Now things are different today, but at that time I felt that it was going to be too difficult to do it all very well, maybe for me anyway. And so we made a very conscious decision that we would not have children, although we dearly love kids and are very close to our nieces and nephews and have worked in children's organizations and so on. But that was one decision that we made that was going to be important in terms of our ability to balance our careers with the rest of our lives.
Talk about your high standards, because that's really what you've just mentioned, that you really want to perform at a level to set a standard against which no one can compete. Talk about that for us.
Right. I think that's probably. I mean, you've put it perfectly. Is that whatever we both decide to do, whether it's medicine, practicing medicine, and being an administrator, doing recruiting, or now writing novels, we want to. It's important to feel that we have put our most of our optimal energy and passion into that particular path. Endeavor, right? Exactly. And so, and so that's for both of us. That's really been key. But I think it's also what's made everything exciting and fun.
Because you've changed in relation to your passion and in relation to, as you mentioned, the forks in the road. I'd like you to explore that a bit more about the forks in the road. Sometimes people are hesitant to explore. And how would you say you made the decisions to take the risk and to explore something new? I mean, I understand that Joel encouraged you, but at the same time, you still had to feel comfortable and confident to do that.
Yeah, I think the first leap that we made from Kaiser was the hardest, probably because that
it was
really,
secure.
That was such a secure position, right? And so if I thought about it long and hard, I probably would have had a heart attack, maybe thinking that what the heck did I do when we put our letters of resignation in? But we just kept looking forward. But I would say that for any decision where you get a fork in the road, I think you have to look at what is the downside, what's the worst that can happen, and what is of course the upside, and be willing to accept the possibility that you might fail and not see that as something terrible that you can't that you can't overcome. I think for a lot of people that's the hardest thing, and I guess because I'm lucky that I do have a very supportive husband, and I don't mean just in the financial sense, but I mean emotionally. That's really important. Who's always very proud of whatever I do. That I feel that if something doesn't work out, if the next book doesn't get published, of course I'll be devastated, but I'll survive.
Don't worry, it will be published. I mean, I've read Rabbit in the Moon, and it's written beautifully, and it's dynamic and exciting, so I don't think you have to concern yourself with that.
Thank you.
Passion is an apt description of how you pursued your professional and personal life, in which you constantly achieved success and acclaim. What advice do you have for our listeners?
Well, I would say you really need to think about what is your passion. I think a lot of people that I speak to, you can tell in their tone of their voice that they're not excited about what they're doing. But if you probe to ask them really what are you passionate about, very often people look at you kind of strangely because they haven't thought about that. So I think, understanding what makes you excited really is important. And
can you explain the it's like a physical change in the body? I mean, you as a physician hopefully can explain the physical changes, because when I try to explain to my coaching clients about passion, frequently they're not or have not experienced it. How would you explain it so that somebody knows when they're feeling passion?
Well, I think it's, first of all, it's feeling excited about getting up every day and doing, and going to your job or sitting at your desk if you're working out of the house. I think what happens to a lot of people that I talk with is that they get into a rut. They look for the next job. They know they're not happy, and they look for the next job based on the job title or the amount of money that they'll make in that job, rather than really whether it fulfills this emotional need or passion, whatever you want to call it. So, it is very hard to describe, and it's not just your heart beating fast or that sort of thing. It's really feeling really happy and excited about what you're doing every day. And I just talked to a friend whose daughter is a physician, and she's gone through years of training and just finished her residency and started her first year at work. And her mother said to me, and I watched her make a decision about where she was going to be working, and I thought that she might be making a mistake, but I don't know her well enough to really say anything. And her mother said, she's not very happy. She just said it's okay. Now, if I were coaching her, I would say, that she really needs to perhaps make a change and, pick something that in her field, of course, at that point, because she's put a lot of time and effort into it. But there must be some other place she can work, or some other area that expands on what she's already learned that will bring that kind of excitement to her that she doesn't feel now. Because after just working 1 year in her job, she's got a long career ahead of her, and that seems such a shame.
Well, what is she unhappy about? Is she unhappy about the particular position, or is she unhappy about the specialty? What is she unhappy about?
I think probably a little bit of both, but I think she's doing rehabilitation medicine, but focused on doing epidural procedures for back injuries. And apparently with the economy, the patients have changed in terms of their adulation that she once, that she got a year ago from them, for one thing. The other thing is that she, like I experienced with my job at Kaiser, is being asked to see more patients more quickly, and that's, clearly not something that, that she's happy about, and I can understand that. So,
well, maybe she doesn't feel ready that she can see so many patients.
Right, but not only that she doesn't feel ready, I think that maybe she rightly doesn't feel that that the time that they want her to take is really appropriate. That she should be able to give more time to the patients. I think a lot of physicians now are feeling that and feeling very burned out because they're just the reimbursements have decreased, and there's, in order to make up for that, there's this treadmill that they've gotten onto, which I think takes away the fun of being able to interact with patients and spend more time with them. And ultimately, I think affects quality.
Oh, I think that's no question. I think if you don't have enough time, how do you really figure out what the diagnoses can be? Because
right.
as you as a physician know that it can be more than one.
Exactly. And the other thing with this young lady is that she's single, and because she's working hard, she hasn't had time to find the balance in her life between career and a social life. And again, understandably, that's that makes for not such a happy situation.
She needs to find a Joel.
She needs a Joel, exactly.
She needs a Joel.
So I need to go into the marriage broker business next.
That's right. That's going to be your next. That's going to be your next entrepreneurial adventure here.
Well, I'm sure you know that you many times in recruiting you certainly are dealing with with the family picture, right? And
absolutely.
I often find that I'm advising people not to take a job because it might mean they're moving their family to a place that I know they're not going to be happy, or they're having to move and leave their family behind while the wife or husband sells the house or whatever, and they're going to be separated for a long time. I personally don't think that's a good idea.
And sometimes people take positions and then think they're going to feel okay about it and are very disgusted and disappointed because it ends up being the wrong fit because the balance isn't right between their career and their family.
Right. I think that, when you asked me this to give advice, I mean, I found a partner in Joel who was someone who like me, spend a lot of time thinking about what our priorities are. I think most people probably don't do that ahead of time, that they kind of, they get into a path, whether it be, say, medical school, you go through the 4 years and then you finish that and you do a residency and then you finish that and then you look for a job. Along the way, I get the feeling that a lot of people really don't think through what it's going to mean at the end of the road in terms of what their lives are going to be like and how they'd like to live those lives.
If you had it to do all over again, are there any changes, looking back, that you would make?
I really can't say that I would, which is good.
Which is wonderful, which is rare.
I mean, Joel and I talk about that a lot. What would we do differently? Of course, if I knew the stock market was going to go up or down, that might be help. But no, in terms of career, I would say, I'm not sorry that I left Kaiser. Looking back, I think it's a wonderful way to practice medicine. But if I hadn't left, I wouldn't have seen all the other opportunities. I wouldn't have had the other opportunities. I wouldn't have learned how to be a manager. I wouldn't have gotten into the recruiting. I wouldn't have met so many people and traveled as much as I have. So no, I think each sort of path that I've taken has really been pretty exciting and fun.
Deborah, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today on Win Without Competing. I look forward to inviting you back soon.
Well, thank you very, very much. I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to coming back again.
And good luck on every single forthcoming novel.
Thank you.
In January 2000, my first guest is Pat Lynch, founder and CEO of Women's Radio on the Web. Passion, commitment, and speaking up have propelled Pat from a U.S. Senate staffer to the first woman to own an advertising marketing firm in the South, to establishing the web's first nationally syndicated talk channel, the WR Channel, standing for Women's Radio. You can do it too. Please join me again on Wednesday, January 14th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Before the next show, email me your career questions which you would like me to answer on Win Without Competing. My address is Dr. Barrow, that's DRBARRO, at winwithoutcompeting.com. To speak with me, call 310-441-5305. Until next time, remember this trigger tip. Change your mindset to the right fit method, and your career and life will flourish. Goodbye for now from Dr. Arlene, Career Coach 1 and author of Win Without Competing.
Have you Googled yourself lately? Are there negative posts from an ex-employee or from a former client? Maybe an outdated news article? Search engines don't always get it right. But right or wrong, it's your reputation on the line. That's where Reputation Defender by Norton comes in. Take control with Reputation Defender. Their cutting-edge approaches help you to wipe away unwanted information in your search results. They also promote the good stuff. You can start by getting your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 800-811-4975 to speak to an expert.